Hey guys, so I actually had to Google to see if this was true, and unfortunately, I've come across the trailer and everything else, and as outrageous as it seems, it's the real deal. There is a movie coming out this fall called The Hunt, and the premise of it is that a group of wealthy liberals kidnap some people out of so-called red states and then hunt them brutally. And the premise is somewhat horrific and meant to be satire, but the timing of it couldn't be worse when we consider what's just happened with these mass shootings and now the great big debate over who and what is responsible for these things happening. And I want to be really careful with this. I avoid these kinds of things, and I was actually already trying to work on a message before I found out about this movie related on this issue. And now I just feel like I don't have any choice but to step into that when this has become something that we're seeing. But I want to be so careful that we don't mix and add to the liberal versus conservative division. And I worry that a message like this can do something like that, but I just still feel like it needs to be spoken to. It's also important for us to understand that we need to separate our Christianity from our politics. Yes, a lot of conservatives are Christians, a lot of Christians are conservative, but our Christian values don't come from our politics, they come from Scripture. And Scripture often contradicts what we see in the political climate, what we see in our culture. So even though the two feel married together, they aren't. And I want us to separate that as we talk about this. So one of the concerns that I have in what's happening when we're trying to place blame on what's going on is the reality is, and I think it is fair to speak to this, that the liberal side of things, and I hate it. I hate to, because as soon as you say sides, you're talking about division. But the liberal side of things, we're looking at, they control the bulk of the message right now. They are the biggest media influence. They are the biggest influence in Hollywood. Hence, a movie like The Hunt just speaks to that so clearly. And so, I mean, there's a few outlets, including Fox News, that present a conservative viewpoint, but there's very little that comes across our consciousness, the stuff that we're feeding into who we are and the stuff that we take in that influences us. There's very little that isn't coming from a liberal controlled source, a liberal perspective that avoids Scripture, that doesn't use a biblical context. So we're inundated with all of this stuff. And we're seeing a lot of this division then I'm laying that responsibility on those outlets, whether it's news sources or it's the entertainment industry. But they have the voice. They have the biggest control over the amount of information that's out there. And so they need to be using that voice then. I mean, liberal, conservative, Christian, non-Christian, can we not agree that the right thing would be use that voice for good? And if we're using that for division, then it's making things a whole lot worse. But we need to look at it in terms of, and I hope this is making a little bit of sense, because I wasn't prepared to do the message just yet till this movie thing came out. But anyhow, the point is, as Christians, we have a role to play in this. So I want to look at a couple verses, and I've taught on this stuff before, but it's more relevant now than ever. This is James chapter 3, verses 5 and 6. He's talking to us about bits in horses' mouths and rudders on ships, and how a small item like that has the power to change the course of a direction, and then talks about our tongue as something that also has that much power. And so likewise, the tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boasts. Consider what a great forest is set on fire by a small spark. The tongue also is a fire, a world of evil among the parts of the body. It corrupts the whole person, sets the whole course of his life on fire, and is itself set on fire by hell. There's not a lot of depth that I can draw into this that I need to try to explain to you guys. I'm just going to read the verse again because I think it's fairly easy to understand. Likewise, the tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boasts. Consider what a great forest is set on fire by a small spark. The tongue also is a fire and a world of evil among the parts of the body. It corrupts the whole person, sets the whole course of his life on fire, and is itself set on fire by hell. So the seriousness of this, that's what James is getting across to us, is that our tongue is capable of doing great evil, great harm, great damage. We see that through the gossip and rumors that get spread about us in the rodeo and bull riding industry. That happens on a regular basis. You just have to look to social media today to see where that's kind of happening. But we do it in our political debates. We do it in our posts on social media. We do it in our conversations. We don't offer words of encouragement as much as we offer words of debate and sometimes destruction, just attacks as we get angrier and angrier. And unfortunately, I really do believe and feel that the consumption of all of this liberal information is what is fueling a lot of this. And so I think it's important for us to step back from our politics, the consumption of all this information as Christians, and spend more time in the Word. I mean, that's where the better part of our time is going to be spent. Not taking in all of this junk that is fueling the hatred and the anger, but instead taking in stuff that can fuel a different way of life. So the next verse I want us to look at is First Thessalonians chapter 5, verses 10 to 11. He died for us so that whether we are awake or asleep, we may live together with him. Therefore, encourage one another and build each other up, just as in fact you're doing. So again, he died for us so that whether we are awake or asleep, we may live together with him. Therefore, encourage one another and build each other up, just as in fact you're doing. So Paul is seeing in this church that he's writing this letter to that they are in fact doing this, and he's just trying to encourage that behavior, that they are encouraging each other, lifting each other up. And there's other verses throughout Scripture, Old Testament, New Testament, that talk about the importance of showing love, kindness, lifting each other up, the power that a kind word has. There's so much about language that's in Scripture and how important it is and how powerful it is. And we're seeing that. We're seeing the results of the power of our words and the harm that it can do, the hatred that it can build. And so I want to clarify something in this, that we understand he died for us so that whether we are awake or asleep, we may live together with him. He's referring then to all of us. So those of us that are awake are the ones that have a knowledge of a saving faith in Jesus Christ. Those who are asleep don't have that faith yet, but we still have to live together, and we still have to love each other, and we still have to encourage each other. So it doesn't matter whether we're Christians or not. It doesn't matter whether we're liberal or conservative. As Christians, our responsibility on either side, if you will, on either side, we need to lift each other up and show all the other things that the Scripture tells us to show as Christians, that we're supposed to show Christ to each other. We talked in a previous message about the Great Commission, that we're supposed to spread the gospel and we're supposed to make disciples. And so this is part of that process, that we love each other, teach each other what we know that is good from Scripture, and lift each other up and encourage them through our faith and through what we understand from Scripture. So I hope that makes a little bit of sense, but we're in a bad place, guys. We're in a real bad place, and we have been for a long time. But I think just the movie just sort of tipped it over for me. Just the idea that something like that is even being presented, satire or not, just the idea that that's being put out there as something for entertainment. Yet how is that not going to fuel the division that we're dealing with right now? So guys, get in the Word. Learn what it says, get off of social media. I mean, here I am on social media presenting this to you, but I mean, let's lessen the time that we spend there and put more of it in the Word so that we can understand these things, so that we're influenced by good and not the darkness that's around us.